Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is New Colt, the 19th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of DLS1 New Beginnings by Mark Akers. Now, I would like to take a moment and thank the DL Saga members and Patreon patrons and invite you to consider becoming a member or patron. You can even pick up DragonLance Media or get $10 off by signing up to startplaying.games using my affiliate links. I'm actually going to be putting in a link also to the campaign that I'm going to be running here, beginning with DLS New Beginnings. It's all going to be in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition through startplaying.games. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. In any case, this is my perspective of this review of this adventure module starter set, however you want to reference it. If yours differs, that's okay. Share your thoughts in the comments or in the live chat if you're joining live in Twitch or YouTube. All right, this is not a pre-written review, so I just read through the module. I'm just going to sort of riff on some of the ideas and thoughts I had about it. I have talked about this module in the context of starter sets in a past DragonLance Hangout. So if you want to see that, you can check out the different Hangout episodes I've got. But this is going to be very much just a review based on from a Dungeon Master's perspective on this module specifically in its totality. So if that interests you, then sit back, hang tight. Let's have some fun. First and foremost, let's talk about the author. Mark Akers is best known for his I2 Tomb of the Lizard King, which was released in 1982. And then, of course, he worked on Gangbusters and Star Frontiers, both of them with TSR in 1982 as well. And then he popped smoke out to Pace Setter, and he was never really a part of TSR again. That is all to say, in his short time with TSR, he worked on some pretty awesome projects. I mean, I played Star Frontiers back in the day when I was a kid, and I really enjoyed it. I'd never played Tomb of the Lizard King or Gangbusters, but after having read this module and then getting ready to run it, I'm kind of interested in checking out Tomb of the Lizard King and seeing what other IPs he's able to, really flesh out. So let's talk about this sort of holistically. This is ultimately, DLS is believed to be, short for Dragonlance Supplement or Saga or something of that sort. It's never really defined by TSR. They just create these nomenclatures for their own internal reference. Sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. What are you going to do? The other modules or source books or accessory pamphlets in the DLS series are all about the different types of elves, whether it's Sylvanisty, Quilinisty, or Kaganisty, and their respective regions after the War of the Lance. So going back and clearing up from Lorak's Nightmare, for example. So it's very kind of interesting how he approaches, or how the DLS series approaches the different eras of elven nations. DLS 1, New Beginnings, has nothing to do with the continent of Anslon at all. It's in fact the first supplement meant for the Time of the Dragon box set for Taladas. And so it not only doubles as a sort of starter set, i.e. how to play Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, the game, but also in Dragonlance, but specifically in Taladas in Dragonlance in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition. So it's a niche of a niche approach. And so it can never fully do anything really well because this is just a splat book. This is just a 38-page adventure. And really the adventure portion of it is like 5 scenes and that's it. And then it's over. So it's really like a one-shot that you just run through after you sit down and do session zeros for every character and make them. So the entirety of this module is very, very odd. And it doesn't really successfully do anything other than talk to you from a player's perspective about how to create a character, but then telling you to talk to your dungeon master a lot. And then give you some what would you do scenarios as a specific class to teach you some genuinely basic concepts when it comes to playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. So it's very, very stripped down, and I'm not sure it's successful at all, and it's probably why I've never heard anyone else ever talk about this specific adventure, because there's really nothing to it. There's not a lot of meat to it. But if you're a GM worth your salt, this is a great entry point into Taladas, because it sets up not just the factions of Taladas, which are what make it interesting all in all. It also sets up some regions in Taladas, and it can be a jumping off point for much larger adventures. Okay, so the Time of the Dragon box set came out in 1989, and this is when Dragonlance just stopped producing content after DL16. It was basically, that was the entirety. DL1 to DL16, including DLA at Dragonlance Adventures, was the entirety of Dragonlance, full stop. And this was, of course, in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st edition or 1.5 era, where they just stopped putting out supplements because they completed the saga. When 2nd edition came out, TSR was really trying to find a way of developing some of the existing IP in new, interesting ways, in addition to showcasing new campaign settings. So Dragonlance did so well in 1st edition that they didn't want to just completely drop it off and forget about it. And at this point, there was no Tales of the Lands box set for Ansalon. This was 100% just 1st edition material with 2nd edition rules. And so they figured, hey, let's do a box set, but let's create a whole new continent on Krynn for Dragonlance that's completely separate and different, and it feels different. The cultures are different. It all sort of ties in because this is the continent where Minotaurs came from originally, and elves populated Taladas originally from Sylvanesty. So there is a little bit of connective tissue, but this was the very first adventure ever after the Tales of the Lands box, after the Time of the Dragon box set, to ever give any sort of beginning player introduction to Taladas. Because even Dragonlance fans, when Taladas came out, were not having it. They did not care about it. Remember, Chronicles and Legends and Tales were wildly popular and propelled the entire book department for TSR from 0 to 100. And honestly, if it wasn't for them, I don't think we would have the vibrant fantasy fiction worlds that we have right now, simply because they started it basing it off of the game products, trying to sell the game products through novels. And so because all fans of Dragonlance were hyper-focused on Ansalon, the idea of a new continent that didn't adhere to any of those other rules didn't really make much sense to them. There were no Knights of Solamnia. There's no Orders of High Sorcery. All the gods had different names. I mean, virtually everything was different. All the cultures were wildly different. So it just didn't do well. Ultimately, TSR course-corrected with the Tales of the Lands box set and hyper-focused all their attention once again on Ansalon, but that would only be after the DLA adventures, including DLR1 Other Lands, and then, of course, DLR2 later in 1990 and 1991, respectively, for Taladas the Minotaurs. And that's the entirety of all the Taladas supplements. There's a series of adventures. There's this starter set. There's the Other Lands, which details this chain of islands and sea elf kingdom that connects between Taladas and Ansalon. And then you got Taladas the Minotaurs, talking about the Minotaurs' history and stuff like that. So after that, they just said, okay, this did not do very well. We're just going to scrap Taladas and hyper-focus on Ansalon once again and tell stories there. All that being said, this was really the first introductory AD&D adventure, meaning brand new players to the game system in 2nd edition. I mean, really what we're talking about is there were some basic D&D introductions, like Holmes's box set in 77. I'm sort of looking through my notes here. But the majority of introductions into Dungeons & Dragons it wouldn't happen until 1994 with the first Quest series, which I'm also actually running characters through right now. It's the audio CD adventure. It's actually a lot of fun. But it's set in Mystara, so I'm doing it on a different channel. But this is the very first AD&D second edition how to play adventure ever created. And it didn't do well because it was in Dragonlance, and most AD&D 2e players were jumping, feet first into like Forgotten Realms and stuff. And then when it first came out, of course. And then, of course, it was in Taladas, which was not a popular place for Dragonlance fans. And so it just didn't do very well. But then even if all that stuff was 100, right? If all those fired perfectly, you still have the problem of the supplement itself. So the first 2/3 of this New Beginnings adventure supplement is spent offering tips to new players on how to create characters, how to play characters, and how to roleplay in general. Everything that it says about how to play the game or how to create your characters is telling you to reference Player's Handbook or other like Time of the Dragon source books. So even though it's presented as this idea of a module as being this is all you need to start playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, that is not true. It is a total lie because you still need the Player's Handbook. And if you wanted to play with any understanding of Taladas, you're going to need the Time of the Dragon box set. So it was not only misinforming the people that would then buy it and find out what it actually was, but it was also not doing the job it was purported to do, which is teach people how to play. But it does give you some really basic, steps on how to create characters, but the Player's Handbook does that already. And then it gives you some really interesting short tips and tricks about how to play in a party setting and how to define your character. But you get a little bit out of that in Player's Handbook, and then your Dungeon Master should be helping with that anyway. So the first 2/3 of this really you don't need. And then it goes into sort of choose your own adventure conceptual idea of what would you do scenarios specific to each class. And remember, all classes are broken down between fighter, wizard, thief, and priest. So depending on what class or subclass you fall in, you just run that one, what would you do? And it's meant that you can play it on your own. But again, if you don't know the rules because you've never played Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, you can't run those modules because they're referencing the Player's Handbook. So unless you have that, you can't play them. It doesn't explain the rules very well. It just gives you basic ideas. And it doesn't even really tell you what the shorthand for the monster stat blocks are that it puts in front of you as a new player. So the only way you can effectively play this is with a Dungeon Master or with knowledge of 2nd Edition, which then shortcuts the whole reason of buying the adventure in the first place. All that being said, the setup in the final adventure portion, when the heroes are going to the village of Beremium in the League of Minotaurs, and this massive invasion attacks, and they have to sort of either survive the invasion or fight back against the invasion, and then they're sort of set upon by a local magistrate asking for help and offering to pay for that help for them to go chase down the remnant hordes and try to figure out what the hell they were doing invading us in the first place. That's the core of this little actual adventure itself. And that part of it is interesting. And it's something that you can flesh out if you want to do more than just a one shot into like a 2 or 3 shot, or just the beginning of a campaign, which then will launch on the back of this. And it does do a pretty good job of breaking you in to the culture of Taladas in the League of Minotaur area of Highvale where this takes place. And really, I think this is a better introduction to Dragonlance players who already know how to play 2nd Edition than it is to new players who don't know how to play anything. Because the only real reason to play in Taladas is if you like Dragonlance. And that's it. And the only way you can play Taladas with rules is if you play 2nd Edition. So you might as well give it a go and just see what Taladas is like if you're already a Dragonlance fan, right? this is a perfect way to break into that. Because Taladas opened up before 3rd edition. And one thing that people really love about 3rd edition was that it put playing monsters right within reach. 2nd edition had some of it, but 3rd edition really just said, hey, you want to play a monster, a goblin? Here's stats for a goblin. But in 2nd edition on Taladas, you could play an ogre, a minotaur, a Bacali lizard man. You could play goblins. Just all sorts of different types of classes that you never had the option of playing in Ansalon. You could play minotaurs in 1.5 edition, but that was about it. And there was ire to ogres, so I'm kind of lying on myself. I'm telling on myself. But in any case, there's a bunch of other monstrous options that weren't available in Ansalon that are available in Taladas. And the cultures are so different and unique and new that it can actually be very engaging. And if you haven't read the Taladas trilogy, you're missing, by Chris Pearson, you're missing out. It is a great, great Dragonlance trilogy. Up there with the King Priest trilogy, in my opinion. I've reviewed all the novels on this channel, so check them out if you haven't yet. Smoker Doge, thanks for tuning in. Good to see you. Ryan Massey, thank you for tuning in. Skull Cowboy, what up? Thanks for tuning in. You ran it 2 weeks ago. Oh my gosh, Ryan. We are on parallel courses here. So in any case, it's an interesting setup to a Taladas campaign. It's one that I think every DM should do if you're going to run a Taladas campaign, because it's an excuse to run the module, which why not just have an excuse to run through one more, Dragonlance module so that you can sort of check it off your bucket list, so to speak. And then ultimately, it gives you a nice little introduction, a way into some new cultures and new types of characters. It introduces some kit versions of characters. In 2nd edition, they ended up introducing kits, which I'm not sure what the parallel would be. I guess it would be like subclasses. I'm not sure what the parallel would be, but they're just basically like kits for like a fighter mage in a specific culture, or a specific culture's version of a shaman. And they give you certain non-weapon proficiencies that you should probably get because of that, and notes about how to play this type of a character. It's just ways to hyper differentiate your fighter from some other fighter is basically what they were. But it's just additional player options for you to explore, which really make your player character feel different and unique, which, of course, in Taladas is what it's all about. So for the purpose of whether or not New Beginnings is good for brand new players to advance Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, I would say it failed, and it's not a very good representation. For introducing new players to Taladas as a region with no idea about Dragonlance in general, it fails. It's just not very good for that. But if you're playing with people who know 2nd edition, if you're playing with Dragonlance fans, I think it does do a good job for that specific group to bring them into Taladas and set up a further adventure or a campaign that you could then run. So for that very niche market, I think it is successful, and really only that niche market. You could take this scenario it presents at the very end of this adventure and put it within any Ansalon area, and it would still work. So it's not like it's isolated only to Taladas. You could play it and include it anywhere you want. It's got all the 2nd edition stats in it, so you can just run it and have a preset one-shot for fun for 2nd edition with it being set anywhere. And that might actually be a better way to go if you don't enjoy Taladas, because I know a lot of Dragonlance fans don't. What are you going to do? So that's kind of the review I've got. If you're a collector like I am, well, then you have to buy this. If you love Taladas, then you definitely have to get it. If you just like Dragonlance, consider getting it. If you want an intro to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, don't go this route. First Quest is much more successful at teaching people how to play 2nd edition than this is. So that is kind of my review. I had a lot of fun going through the module. I can't wait to run it. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to run it. And for those of you who never have, maybe consider joining my game, and then we can run through it and start some really exciting stuff together. And I'll just follow whatever Ryan's doing next, because I seem to be doing that already. All right, thank you guys so much for tuning in. That is going to do it for my review of DLS New Beginnings by Mark Akers. What do you think of this Taladas 2nd edition introductory adventure? Have you ever run through this adventure yourself? And if you did, what was the follow-up and sort of outcome of it? Did the players enjoy it? Did they want to continue in Taladas? Or they're like, nah, let's go back to Ansalon? Let me know in the comments below. Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com. And of course, I would like to thank creator patron Aaron Hardy, producer patron Azrael, and developer patrons Chris Androu and Sam Ruiz. I'd also like to take a moment and just remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button, because that all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. And this channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga for all its quirkiness and weirdness. Thank you for joining that celebration. So, for Dragonlance Saga, my name is Adam. Until next time, Slán Javar.